This may feel uncomfortable, but it's the only way things are going to change. I had planned to spend this entire month of June talking about color filters, color gels. As it turns out, today I'm still going to talk about color, but not about gels or filters. My name is Matthew Jordan Smith. I'm an African American photographer, born in Brooklyn, New York, raised in the South Carolina, and now living in Japan. People often ask me why I live here, and there are a couple of reasons. And often I give the other reasons why I live here. Today I want to talk about the one that I don't talk about. For the past 4 years, I've lived in Tokyo, Japan. And normally I fly back to America for work. And some ask why I do that. So here's the hard truth. It's safer for me to live outside of my country than to live inside America. I read an email this morning where the writer says, "We can't imagine what it's like to be the victim of systemic distrust and profiling." And that has proven to be true in America. No one can imagine it. Maybe you noticed yesterday was Blackout Tuesday, where many people on Instagram posted a blank black frame with the hashtag Blackout Tuesday. I've also witnessed people pushing back when they hear or see the phrase Black Lives Matter, with a response like, "But all lives matter." And I agree, all lives matter, but Black lives matter too. In America, systemic profiling and distrust is the norm. Black people live with this every single day. This didn't really hit me until I moved to Japan. When you experience what it's like not to live with that, it's wonderful. It gives you peace. As a photographer, it opens you up to be more creative than you've ever been because you don't have this burden that you carry on your shoulders. What's happening in America? Black America is asking to be heard. If someone says Black Lives Matter, and your answer is, well, all lives matter, or to say color does not matter, those things may sound good, but it's not reality. If you listen to this podcast, you are probably a photographer, and we see things visually. So imagine this. It's the morning of September 11th, 2001, and you are in New York City. You're not in downtown Manhattan. You're in Midtown, or you're further away, uptown, and there's a fire station right by your home. Now, on this day in 2001, every fire truck in the city rushed downtown to the World Trade Center because there was an emergency. They needed help downtown. That makes sense, right? That every fire truck would rush to the area where there is a fire or there's a massive event going on where they are needed. But there are buildings all over Manhattan, all over New York City. Imagine if one neighborhood says, "Oh, well, I understand there's something going on downtown, but our homes are important too. All homes are important." Well, yes, all homes, all buildings are important. But right now, the World Trade Center downtown is in trouble. It's on fire. People are dying. So yes, every building in New York City is important. But the one that's on fire is the one that needs the urgent attention because people are dying. Now, during 9/11, every firehouse understood that, and they all rushed down to handle the emergency. Well, in America, There has been a state of emergency for a long time, and things have finally hit the boiling point, the tipping point, the things we are hearing about in the last few weeks. They're not new. They're just recorded for the first time. For a while now, in photography, there have been discussions about the effect on photography based on the smartphone. But right now, in this moment, I'm glad to have a smartphone, and I'm glad that almost everybody out there has a smartphone, because for the first time, people can record what's happening. Because if people can't see it, they don't believe it. And even still, when they see it, they still doubt if it's real. Almost everybody in America watched as a policeman knelt on a man's neck and took his life. This doesn't happen to any other segment of the population on the level that it happens to African Americans. This is why this movement exists, Black Lives Matter, because people want to be heard. Maybe it should be Black Lives Matter too. I know this is not what you were expecting today, but no one expects to walk out their door and not be able to come back home again, or have to wonder, am I next? This is a daily reality for many people of color. Yes, including me. Every time I step off the plane and land on U.S. soil. Every time I see a policeman driving behind me. I know this is a very different podcast, but this is not the time to sit silently. This is the time to put our heads together and figure out what we can do to finally put an end to this. It starts by having empathy. And I don't just mean for this, but for everything. Think about COVID-19. I watched in Asia as the virus first began, and how almost every country paid no attention until it hit their front door. That was not just America, but almost every country. Borders are man-made. This year, the universe has been knocking on our front door and asking all of us to have more empathy, to think about our fellow man, to treat your neighbor as you would treat yourself. The golden rule. It's as old as time itself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. How amazing would our world be if we all just followed that simple rule? This is the time for all of us to come together. My last trip to the States was in February, where I did a shoot and spoke in Vegas. And the last model I photographed in America, in person, is a Caucasian woman, and she posted something on her site that I'd like to read to you now. The murder of George Floyd and the subsequent lack of accountability by the police has set into motion what can only be described as a moment of reckoning for our nation's conscience. How we become free, truly free, depends largely on what happens next. Now, not all police in America are bad. I'm not saying that at all. There are a lot of great policemen in the States, but there is a portion that see people of color as a threat and treat us differently. And that has to change. This is not just about civil rights, but really human rights. These are human rights violations and should be classified as such. Things cannot stay the way they've been, or they'll be exactly that, the same. I know many can't imagine what it feels like to grow up in a place where you are mistrusted or profiled all the time. We are photographers. We're often telling people to imagine what an image will look like. We can go into great detail to explain what the picture will look like, the colors, the feel, the energy, the background. But still, people cannot imagine what that image will look like. They have to see it in reality or experience it in some way. It's the same thing with racism. Nobody can imagine what it feels like unless it's happening to you. We hear the word empathy, but you have to train yourself to have the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. What would the world look like if everybody truly followed the golden rule? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It would change the world. I hope you can understand the need for today's podcast. And I hope in some way that it brings about meaningful conversations that may not be easy to have, but are necessary. For those of you who are out protesting, please stay safe. We are still in the midst of one of the greatest threats to humanity right now, the COVID virus. But there's also another virus out there, and it's called racism. Be careful, be smart. I'm Matthew Jordan Smith. Bye for now.